Hello, this is Dr. Justina Agnieszka Szewali. As promised, I will now review the proper charting. The proper charting in mental health consists of taking history that sets up mind markers of most enjoyable experiences, including adulthood loving relationships, and marking the ones that were prior to that, in which exclusive relationship occurred in the past, as overcame, meaning those persons, if pushed by social pressure, like it was in case of Ashkenazi Jews or in case of racial segregation, cause desire to fight any pursuit of sexuality, and also cause trying to internalize suffering and lies to not to hurt feelings of that person that is cared for the family, and asking for medication to mimic state of properly functioning loving union. So again, we take history, and the regression hypnosis also serves for that, of all of past relationships as mental health providers, which license on, which is often not done, emphasis is put on pain, to be able to create a state in which use of prescription and non-prescription causing pleasurable states or causing anesthesia drugs is not necessary. I am talking about mental health here as prelude to phenomena that occur at the level first of neurotransmitters and then at the level of physical bodily changes and are manifested in pain. Medicine narrows often practice to only investigation of pain, and we need to understand avoidance of pain as life guidance is survival mode and is unnatural and typical to short periods of time, for instance in cases of natural disasters, or in highly skilled persons such as myself with higher education, where skill or action to remediate death or remediate suffering is needed before having a pursuit of own happiness, personal happiness, and that is as being single or as being in a couple. Charting in mental health, then, when the person occurs, consists of elaboration of natural tendency toward happiness, maximum, optimal happiness, declared by that person from past memories and as a current state. And that is what is also in Freudian theory associated with sex, meaning we investigate in those therapies, as therapists, we investigate past sexual relationships and pleasant relationships that consist of memory markers that set up similar to a cup of coffee. What is the best? Meaning that person loved most and was loved by the client or patient the most, and set up memory marker that associates looks of that person or associates that person's education, vocabulary, language, etc. profile as maximum, toward which all past relationships less in intensity, are like best tried coffee, are remembered as less and non-pursued. When we offer a coffee to a person that is best as opposed to one that person does not like, the person will inevitably, also by physical rejection to that coffee, prefer coffee that is remembered as best. And the same rule guides choice of life partners, sexual ones, and that therefore persons who overcame maturation in scattered or limited in intensity or painful relationships by having partners that were mature, meaning in reciprocity, provided self-esteem, feeling of being attractive and appreciation of that person loving for such one individual, that becomes then a basis to having that the other ones as not possible. And then overcoming comes with establishment of characteristics associated with past harm and pain to that person, present in others, in experience or exposure to those characteristics that create new memories that associate them with something, with goodness, with happiness. Example of that is, for example, abusive father. Abusive father who has harmed the mother sets up a standard for a son in which, for example, if the father was drinking alcohol, that son will seek for persons who drink alcohol intends on violence, even if persons drink socially and use alcohol too as recreation and nothing more. If then that person, what's overcoming, if that person meets enough persons who possess same characteristics such as social drinking as the father, but are non-violent, meaning in context of alcohol pursue dancing, joy, pursue pleasuring or being polite, that being cordial, then that person resolves past trauma by new memory markers of negative prior to that characteristic, which is an action associated with violence, with association of the same characteristics in different persons with goodness, kindness, etiquette, and politeness. And that is called overcoming and becomes coping mechanism, meaning the person in exposure to other persons and alcohol will not respond anymore with fear, but with calculation, rational calculation, meaning is that person that offered me a glass of wine, after that glass of wine, polite and cordial and invites to dance or to meet family, or is that person trying to pursue against my will unwanted sexual relationship, or pursues direct, straightforward violence or risk? And the differentiation of that habit, now stripped of one negative tint remembered in the past, becomes objective, meaning that characteristics, action of drinking alcohol, that's an example, becomes in exposure to everyday life either something in a contrast with another person that can be associated with pleasure, joy, and social habit and socializing, or with something bad in proportions of probability of occurring harm versus joy to the degree of persons that use that alcohol in social behaviors that are considered acceptable or wanted. And that is called overcoming of past trauma and also applies to PTSD. Similar mechanism rules in the making charts so that therapy is finite and as a result ends with adjuvant medication to create states of pain tolerance, and artificial synthetic joy ends in overcoming by association of bad in the past associated with violence characteristic with good behaviors, pleasure, and goodness. The same rule is for sexual, loving, long-lasting relationships. If in the past, for instance, a wife was abused by the husband, and that person remembers, for example, that the person who has a let's say, I don't know, let's choose one characteristic, is a construction worker, because that was the profession of that spouse, and that spouse, each time that spouse would gather with other construction workers, that spouse would reject that female sexually or treat her in a derogative way to prefer work that is of high importance, because that woman's sexual drive and pursuit of nesting and children for self impeded pursuit of housing and that worker's employment in others when he worked for the company. And so each time, for instance, she wore a mini skirt or tried to be nice or make a dinner a romantic one, the husband would punish her with ridicule, calling her sick or calling her promiscuous. And that is associated with trauma. Then when divorce or separation occurs, that all of persons that possess construction work, education, and the job will reject that woman, humiliate her, or not love her for loving that man in a relationship. So what does this mean? It means that next person that woman dating meets that has construction work will be rejected because of that line of work. And overcoming by memory marker becomes then exposure to persons that work in construction, series of men and women, in which at least one of those persons possessing some same education, when she would form or pursue long-term sexual relationship and children, would rejoice in being pursued as a father sexually, for instance wearing especially for him beautiful feminine clothes, or being prepared dinner for, and will not then be stigmatized in her mind as all persons who work in construction will reject me. Will be some persons who work in construction will reject and be impolite when I demand personal time and intimacy at expense of work, and some will rejoice that and prefer over construction work my company despite having the same education. Overcoming. And what is the characteristic? Recollection in therapy to the therapist to write down happy memory that happened in mind in the context of same characteristics, same profession prior to that, associated in another person with rejection and harm and low self-esteem, with, in the contrary, with appreciation over that construction work of that female pursuing intimacy and love and dinners and time with that construction worker number two, or number whichever it is, depending on the evolvement of that relationship to marriage and children or not, or evolvement of that relationship to working relationship or friendship or a cordial polite relationship in context of society. And charting consists of obtention in memories, memory markers of pleasure, and then of overcoming negative characteristics in the same degree of intensity of pleasure in the proportion to the presence of the characteristics as it was present as pain in the past, in as many circumstances as possible socially, in many different persons. And then that person does not respond with fear, with suppressed pleasure circuits, and does not need medication anymore, and therapy can end. So meaning that which was PTSD, or that which was trauma associated with rejection or even attack in case of predators or serial killers, of persons that possess same characteristics associated with harm, association with these characteristics with goodness, and no longer hatred, anger, and no longer generalization to seek in all others that characteristics as a trademark of danger to self or others to eliminate.